Okay, good, yay. All right, we're set to go. Thank you very much for coming to our fourth of our series of flexible brown bag lunch meetups. And I am very pleased to introduce Abbie to you. Abbie is a neighbor in innovation land for me. She works at CTI Innovations. I think you guys are across the street now. I'm really pleased to have Abbie here. She has a really interesting job, and you'll get to see a little glimpse of the type of cool stuff that she does. But she's doing both, digital, web apps, as well as physical interfaces. So all over the different worlds of design. And she's a graduate from the GPDA program in Stratford, and just really, really happy to have her here. So with no further ado, Abbie.
Alright, so hi, my name's Abbie. I'm a user experience designer currently at Canadian Tire Innovations, as Jana said, just across the street. And today I'm going to be talking about, I feel like my hair, there we go. Today I'm going to be talking about bringing UX practices to a new virtual reality. And I'm going to be talking about that by citing my experience designing a VR campsite. And I'm going to tell you what that is. So a little bit about me, work for Canadian Tire. Canadian Tire Innovations is kind of Canadian Tire's corporate innovation lab. We look at new ways to solve problems, innovative ways to solve problems. We also look at new technology and how that could potentially help the organization in a variety of different ways. I've worked with teams all across the organization, worked with PartSource a bit, Sport Check, worked with some dealer operating systems all over the map. So as a designer, that kind of means I work on physical and digital usability testing for prototypes. I do traditional app and web design. I do a little bit of marketing and graphic design. As the sole designer of the lab, it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag of what I do. So I graduated from Bachelor's of Global Business and Digital Arts. I kind of have a conventional path to design, which is kind of sort of unconventional, because I feel like a lot of people who come up here, they say I have an unconventional path to design, but I actually feel like I have a conventional one. I got into multimedia and graphic design in high school, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to do, and I saw GPDA, and I kind of bridged the gap for both of them, so I went into that, and then I discovered UX design in first year, and I realized I really like making people happy with the things that I make, and I really like technology, so UX design just was that nice bridge, and I've loved it ever since. I also put a coffee mug in the corner because I really like coffee, and that mug is the same color as my car. I have a bright orange Prius. So you're probably wondering what's in it for me, especially if you might not be super into designing for VR every day. Or you are into VR, there's a bit for everybody. The first thing I'm going to tell you is that it's going to kind of open the curtains to what the corporate innovation labs are like. Innovation is kind of a bit of a buzzword term. It's not super practical as far as like what are they actually doing when you say innovation. So I'm going to pull back that curtain and give you a really practical look at what we did over the past couple of months with this VR campsite. I'm also going to tell you a little bit about how to take your design skills that you've learned either in school or on the job and apply it to a completely new area. I had no experience designing for virtual reality before I did this, and this is going to show you a little bit of how I approached this, how I went through it, all of the things that I tried and things that failed and things that worked. I think it's going to be fun. And then finally, obviously, there's going to be some tips on how to design in VR. We're going to look at some fun experiences like SpiderMan and Robot Dog and all of that stuff. It's going to be fun. Okay, so a little bit of information you're going to need to know about Canadian Tire. I'm assuming all of you have been to a Canadian Tire retail store before. Yeah, I mean, if not, just look for the big red triangle out on the street somewhere. There's probably one. But you may not know that we actually own everything to the right of the screen here. Or I guess maybe you're left, I'm sure. But Canadian Tire Corporation owns everything on the list, including Sport Check, Marks, Atmosphere. We own the Forzani Group, which also owns like National Sports and Pro Hockey Life. We own a ton of consumer brands. I listed the 3 up there. And if you've been paying attention to the news, we recently acquired Party City, all of the Party City stores in Canada. So now if you go to Canadian Tire, you will have literally everything you need for a backyard party, including a fire pit and patio furniture. Another quick note is Canadian Tire retail works a little bit differently compared to the other banners that we own. Canadian Tire retail works on a dealer model, so owners have sort of a lot of autonomy over what goes in their store. They can choose to opt in and out of certain technology. They have to have a certain product line, but then there's another line that they can kind of choose what they want to put in the store. That's why you could go to one Canadian Tire and get something and not get it at another one. There's a lot of interesting little perks and things like that within the relationship. So when I talk about dealers, one thing with the innovation lab that we always have to consider is, will the dealers want to put this in the store? That's kind of step one. And it's a very important relationship, and it's kind of a make or break. So whenever I say dealers, I'm referring to this relationship of them adopting something into the store. All right, so now you're wondering, what is this VR campsite that I have mentioned a few times now? I am going to show you a video right off the bat so you know what I'm talking about. I might narrate a little bit throughout. This is me using the VR campsite a couple of days ago, and we'll just hop into it. So yeah, I am disassembling a tent right now. Just watching it disassembled, and then decided to reassemble it again. You can picture some nature sounds, because that's what you hear in your ears. There were 2 tents in this experience. I decided to teleport inside it, so I'm actually like inside the material of the tent. So I was sitting down on the floor at that point in my living room, looking at the tent, and then I teleported while I was still sitting down so I could get back up. And then the way that you open products in this experience is you throw them on the ground. And then I tried to put it inside the tent, because one of the things we noticed with users is they wanted to see if a sleeping bag would fit inside it, so that's what I'm doing here. It kind of stuck out in the one corner, so I had to go and fix it. And then our very special barbecue. You can pick up the burgers and sausages. There is actually a story with this axe that I will tell in a minute. There's a reason that I'm showing you it now. You can't chop the picnic table, and I figured that out again. And then, yeah, I wanted to look at a wood's table. So there it is set up, and I've decided that I want to buy it. So the way that you buy something in our VR campsite is you go and throw it in that bin over there. I think I almost missed. And then if you want to buy the tent, you literally pick up the tent and you throw it in there too. And then the last thing here, I didn't want the sleeping bag, so I had to go and throw it in the trash can to delete it. And then I'll just showcase a little bit of the couple features we were thinking about. One of them was fun. This one is rain. It's really big pellets of rain. It's like golf ball size almost. We had to tweet that, and there's no clouds, so that was like just a prototype there. And then there is actually a bear. I think it's and then I quickly turned it off, and that's it. Alright, so you've seen the VR campsite now. Congratulations. You're probably wondering, maybe a little bit confused, maybe a little bit excited. So I'm going to do a little bit of the poll of the room. There's 2 sides of the fence I feel like you'd be on when you just saw that video. You're either going, wow, this is incredible, I want to try this, I want to go inside the tent. Or you're on the skeptical side of, why does Canadian Tire really need a VR campsite? Camping in real life is more fun than this VR campsite. Why would Canadian Tire need something like this? So raise your hand if you're on the enthusiastic, let me try this right now side. Oh wow. Maybe no one's skeptical. Is anyone skeptical in the room? technology is really exciting. I think it's something that is only kind of at the beginning stages right now. But then I was also on the side of like, does Canadian Tire need a VR campsite? Like, what is this going to be used for? Is this just going to be a thing where like, oh, Canadian Tire has VR now? Like, there's no really problem it's solving, it's just a VR thing. But I'll explain that the VR campsite actually was potentially solving two big problems within the company. The first is that tents are big and awkward to sell. So when you set them up, they take up, like, probably take up this whole area right here. It's kind of thinking about it from a dealer's perspective, a sales per square foot model. If you think about the amount of products that they could sell that sell more often or sell all season, you could put that in that space instead of having one tent that they can't even buy, that's just the tent that they look at. So that usually means that a lot of times tents end up in boxes, which is kind of terrible for the consumer because you can't see the tent set up. And even if you can see the tent set up in store, it's on like a stone cold hard floor. It's not out in the wild where it's supposed to be. So in the end, selling tents in stores is a bit tricky. The second thing that we were looking at here was that VR is often seen as like a thing for games. Like people see it as like a gaming console. That's where you can see like the controller and the buttons there. Like people just think it's a fun game. There aren't a lot of practical, at least public practical ways to use VR. So we wanted to show the corporation that there is potentially a way that VR could be helpful within the organization and also be like an interesting way to sell tents. So voila, a VR campsite. He's a happy little heart of eyes emoji there. The team was going to be me and then two VR co-ops, Yusuf and Jerry, who I don't think are here. But they were going to do a bunch of the development, basically live in Unity for a long time. And then I was looking at the sort of how users would use this VR campsite. What are some of the problems and things we needed to consider? How would they go about? What are some things that we need to think about to make this experience really fun for people? So I started by looking at a bunch of VR experiences. It was the best week at work. Spent a long time looking at VR games. It was a lot of fun. I tried everything on the list and a lot more up here. And I took kind of a market research approach to all of this, just dividing it, each experience looking at 6 different areas. 4 main ones here was onboarding, visuals, movement, interactivity with objects. Was there any multimedia and how did they handle it? And were there any transactions that I had to worry about, like any in-game buying or anything like that? So it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of things. I'll dive into a couple of them just to show you. The first one is one of my favorites. It is SpiderMan Homecoming VR. It's as cool as it sounds. You look down and your hands are Spider-Man's hands and you can shoot webs out of your hands. It's really fun. And you can like pick things up. The visuals are really cool and they're real enough to be like, when you put the headset on, you kind of feel like you're actually in like a real world scenario. So you're picking things up with webs in like the city and stuff. It's really fun. One thing though, or actually I'm going to show you one more. Another one was, this was called Alamut. It's a free one. It was a story about a girl who had lost somebody, and you see this little cartoon girl go throughout life, and you can watch the story from any angle you want. So in this ship, you can look at it from the front, or you can look at it from the back or the sides, or you can stick your head right in the ship and look at the girl like super close if you want to. All of these, Spider-Man and Alamut were great, but the visuals were great. But one thing that I kind of lacked in those experiences was a chance to actually interact with things. So with this story, you couldn't touch anything that changed the story or impacted the story. So the visuals were great, but they weren't. It wasn't super fun to interact with that story. Same with Spider-Man. I wanted to shoot webs at everything, and I could only shoot webs at one thing, and that was kind of sad and disappointing. The next thing is Rec Room. This is a interactive kind of room full of games, and then you start out in this bedroom where you can like change your outfit and like customize your character and stuff like that. There were lots of interactive things in this experience. If you put your arm out like this, you had a bunch of buttons that you could click from on your like smartwatch, and you could actually press the buttons that were sticking out with your controller, which I thought was really cool. You make friends by shaking somebody's hand, and you block somebody by putting your hand in front of their face. And it was a lot of fun. So you can interact with almost everything in this game. The thing I didn't like about this though is the movement was very almost nauseating, and I'll explain a little bit more about why that was. But it was just something that I saw in there, and the way I moved was quickly kind of like disorienting. So my favorite experience overall was the lab. It's a free experience. If you've tried the HTC Vive before, you've probably played the lab at some point. And I'm going to show you one little cute aspect here. I don't think it needs to, I'll explain it afterwards. I think it's more fun to just watch it. So this is a little robot dog that you get to pet and throw sticks for in the mountains. And it's super excited to go get that stick. It doesn't have a mouth either, so it just kind of like picks it up with its eye. And that's it. That's one thing that a lot of people say in the lab is their favorite thing is this little robot dog. And I can just imagine it's probably somebody on the side who just was having some fun developing for it. All right, so after I looked at all of these VR experiences, I went to my trusted free resources, Google, YouTube, and Medium, looking at VR and everything around VR and everyone's personal experiences with VR and how they developed for it and what they kept in mind. And I found a ton of stuff. So this QR code takes you directly to the Notion document. If you don't want to use QR codes, there is just my website there, /VR. There's a ton of resources there, a lot more that are listed that aren't listed up here. Prototyping, different things to keep in mind. I keep adding to it all the time as well, so feel free to take a look. I'll talk about a few of them here. The first is VR paper prototyping. It's this just basically a template where you can sketch your ideas, and it kind of divides it similar to the GIF up there, primary information, then secondary and tertiary, kind of like real life. If you're looking at something, you're probably going to look at this right here, and then there's secondary and tertiary information around you. And then there's other prototyping programs like A-Frame. If you're really into HTML, A-Frame I believe is open source, and you can prototype in VR or AR using HTML and this API, which is pretty cool. And then there's other ones that don't require any coding, like Tilt Brush and Google Blocks. Tilt Brush is you take your controller and you paint things, and you can walk all around it and do whatever you want. Google Blocks actually uses 3D models, like if you make OBJ files, like if you're into 3D modeling even a little bit, you can make an OBJ file, put it into Google Poly, and then you can put it into Google Blocks, where you can walk around it in VR, which is pretty cool. And then I also learned a cool thing about comfort in VR. That was probably the biggest takeaway from all of my research, was that comfort is really important. A lot of people, you'll probably hear if you talk about VR, is like, I felt sick when I used it. And you don't want people to feel sick when you're using your experience. So one thing, if you see my setup over there with the 2 base stations, the one thing that kind of makes you feel less sick about this particular one is that you can actually walk around in that 2 to 3 meter space. And then if you move, you like teleport and things like that. But walking around makes it so that your brain is seeing the environment that's moving and your feet are actually moving. It's like the same thing. Whereas it's kind of the same effect. If you do it wrong, it's like being car sick. So when you're in VR, if your environment's moving around and you're not, your eyes are going, I'm moving, and your body's going, no, I'm not, and then you get sick. So that's what happens, and that's a big thing that I learned while doing this experience here. All right, so diving into the product, or the 2 things that I decided to tackle in the VR campsite. The first was product information. So in a lot of games, there isn't a ton of text once you get into the actual game. And then one thing as a screen designer was that text didn't really scare me as much as when I went into VR. So text, when you're a screen designer, it goes somewhere on a rectangle that you are designing. It can go like in the top corner, but it's on a 2D plane. In VR, text can go anywhere. And that immediately became intimidating. Like, where do I put this information? Will it be overwhelming? Will people even see it? Will it be too far away, too close? All of that stuff. Suddenly text became a really important thing, and especially for a retail experience, you need that text. Like, you can't just show somebody a tent and then not show them the price tag. So it needs to have a ton of stuff in order for a user to consider buying it. So my question that I wanted to answer was, how might we display product information in VR without making anyone feel sick, overwhelmed, and or uninformed? So being a traditionally screen designer, I did an ABCD test. I took a traditional A-B test and I added 2 more letters. And I decided to think about 4 different ways to display product information in VR. The first on the top, well, the one up there here, information near the tent. That's very similar to like a campsite. So you have your post beside the tent, and it shows you the information on like a board, and then the tent is right there. The second one is the audio one. I saw this in Rec Room. They did this with the tutorial. They spoke to you and told you what to do, and it actually worked out fairly well. So it's like, let's try it for product information and see what happens. The physical tent tags is very close to real life Canadian Tire selling tents. You take a tent tag, you pick it up, and there's information about the tent on there. And then the last one is floating text, which is kind of like, if you saw in the actual video, that's the one we ended up going with, but the floating text that just floats there, when you turn your head, it turns with you. It's very like obviously there pointing to a specific item. So we tested it. We tested it with, I think it was around 10 to 15 people at Communitech. In addition to figuring out what tent was the best one to go with, or what product information method was the best one to go with, we learned that there were different kinds of users of VR. So some people who are new to VR will put the headset on and then they just kind of like stand there. They don't do anything. They just look around and you're like, you can move around if you want to, and they're just like watching VR kind of like a movie. Just really overwhelmed a little bit, not moving a lot, takes a lot of push, like come on, like, use the controllers, move them. And then the second type of user that we found were gamers. So these people usually had played PlayStation VR or the cardboard VR, which maybe many of you have tried, where you have the phone in like I heard it was called like almost a toaster, where you put it on your head and then you look around like this. They've usually tried something like that, but they haven't moved around a lot in VR. So these people were a little bit more comfortable in the environment. They would move around, but it was a good test for us to see like what was obvious and what wasn't, because a lot of times these people wouldn't pick up the tent tags because they wouldn't notice that you could pick them up. They were great for figuring out things that weren't as obvious. And then the pros, which was this guy on the right here, they would do crazy things. They would put the headset on and then like within 2 seconds they would have the tent on top of their head, because they knew that they could pick it up and like instead of bending down, like just pick up the tent and put it down. That was always interesting to see like what off the wall behavior are they going to do. So that part was a lot of fun. And the winning tent was the floating text, as you saw in the video. There was a close second with the physical tent tags, because people really liked that you could pick them up once they figured it out. It was like, oh cool, I can like take the controller, pick up the tent tag and drag it right to my face. But it was very much the interactivity that they liked, and we figured in the experience as a whole, there's a ton of things to interact with. So floating text at least gets some of that important information a lot quicker. They can take a look right away. So the second thing we tested was general usability. I wanted to see if there was a way we could make it, so if this was an in-store experience, one of the things that would be sort of appealing to dealers is if they didn't have to have a red shirt / employee, we call them red shirts because they wear red shirts. It would be great if they didn't have an employee manning it 24/7. And then at home, obviously, you want people to be able to use your experience without calling Canadian Tire saying, I can't use this. So I'll show the GIF now. This kind of relates to later. But how might we teach people how to use the VR campsite without causing confusion and or requiring a red shirt to teach them? And this GIF is actually, I'll tell you later why I chose this one. All right, so I have another video here. So this is the tutorial that we ended up coming up with. I think the one that's on the headset right now is slightly different, but it's mostly the same. And I'll show you a piece of it. So one thing we noticed in the last attempt was that people had trouble teleporting, so we made them teleport to each platform up in the sky. And then you had to pick up a ball and throw it up. And that was it. So there was each platform told you or gave you a different task. You had to complete that task and then teleport to the next platform. So we tested this tutorial and we tested the overall VR campsite with people, and the results were very interesting. The first thing, yeah, I guess I'll explain this picture first since everyone's laughing. This guy was laying down in the tent to see if he could fit in it. So we didn't tell him to do this. I tried to stay out of it as much as possible, and he was a tent expert. So literally 5 minutes in, he's on the floor, and I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I want to see if I can fit. I'm like, how many people would fit? And I'm like, okay. But it was fun. A lot of people did stuff like this. They were all on the ground, and they were I don't know, looking all over. It was so funny. But one of the things I learned was don't make assumptions, because if you saw the tutorial, I don't know if anyone had this cross their minds, but fear of heights is a real possibility. And when they put the headset on, I had to talk the first guy from he was stunned. He was looking around, he's like, I don't really like heights that much. And I'm like, oh no, like I didn't even think about this. I didn't think that people would be scared, but when you put the VR headset on, you can't see your, like we were in a boardroom on a carpet, and I was like, oh, people are not gonna know that, like people are gonna know that we're not standing 40 feet in the air, but once you put the headset on, you can't see where you are anymore. So this reality of potentially falling so many thousands of feet to the ground was not something that I thought about until people tried it. And I had a few people like that I had to really like coach down for a bit. So that was really surprising. It was just something that, because I was so head deep into VR, I didn't take it into consideration. It was just a thing that I was designing. And once people put it on, I realized, oh man, we gotta think about this. The second thing I learned is that the experience is very immersive, and once people feel comfortable, things get really fun and exciting for people. And I'll show you a few examples right now. So this is where the axe comes back. Everybody picked up this axe in our experience. All 10 people went and they grabbed the axe and they asked if they could chop the picnic table down or chop the trees down. And yeah, so we had one guy like completely not in the campsite anymore, just like teleporting everywhere and trying to cut trees down, and we're like, you can't do that. But it was really fun. So just this little tiny thing that was like built into Unity, like the model was already there, we just threw it in because it felt like a campsite. Everybody grabbed this. We also noticed a couple of like problems throughout. Kind of was the cart and the recycling bin were not super well marked, or people didn't really know what to do with them. We were like, how do you purchase something? And some people understood that that was a cart, but other people were kind of like, is this just like a campsite bin? Like, do I put equipment in there? How do I buy something? I don't know. Like, a few people just said, I don't know. And then for deleting things, there is a delete button like on each object. But it was kind of like, we were like, so how do you delete something? Thinking that they would get that the trash bin was where you throw it in. And it was quickly, no, like not really. It was a little bit hard to understand. So we took those two insights away. I think if it was like a V4 or something like that, we'd probably have an actual cart. I think that would make a little bit more sense. Or even just a buy button on the actual like product itself. Utilize those signposts a little bit more. So takeaways for you guys, and things that I took away from this experience. The first was, don't make assumptions. People could actually be scared of your design like they were with mine. Make sure that you are constantly getting things in front of your user as fast as possible, because you're going to find things that you just didn't think about. And that was something that I learned very quickly when I was testing this experience. The second thing is, don't be afraid to take UX beyond your rectangular screen. There's a lot of things that need you to think about the user in that scenario, like even thinking about store experiences. There's experiences like just being in here right now. Take your UX skills that you've learned and those basic general principles and give it a try. Like change an A/B test to an ABCD test, or like go and usability test something that's completely off the wall. It's not going to be a big deal if it doesn't work out super well. It's the fact that you tried it and what you learned from it. That's a big thing that I took away. And then finally, experimenting, which kind of goes with the second point, is like just experimenting and iterating and trying these things. Don't be afraid to just like go out there and try something. And that's everything that I've got. That's the VR campsite, and that's what I learned designing in virtual reality. And I'll take questions. I can take questions now, and then I also put this back up in case anyone missed it the first time.
You also brought stuff with you.
Yes, oh yeah. If you have some time afterwards, I did bring the campsite here, so it's over there. I still have to set it up. Like, I still have to set up one more thing, but if you do want to try it and have some extra time, I'm happy to show you. I think there's a big slide. Oh.
So I assume the intention that this will be in the store.
Yeah, it was. We were still just kind of deciding that. This is very like prototypey still. The plan was either. Did it die? Hello? Okay, there we go. Yeah, we had thought a lot about both because it was still sort of like we're not sure yet. It depends, I guess. I think some stores, like the bigger stores, could have it. The problem is, like, if you guys have ever been to the Victoria Street store, that one's really small and really jammed. So I don't know if that would fit. So that's where, like, we might release like a Steam app if that was ever down the line, like thinking about that.
So the second part of the question is, if it's in the store, have you thought about designing the experience around that? Because I imagine you have to stand on the floor. I'm sure a lot of people do not feel comfortable in the store with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that would take a lot more testing, I think. We'd have a couple of test stores that would like try this out. We might actually, I mean, if it was in store, I could think about like having a carpet in that specific area to like make it a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, definitely. I think that was the question here.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly about Unity developers. Who else was on your team that built this?
It was the 2 Unity developers and me.
Okay. So they did all the modeling, or you did the modeling?
Yeah, they all did the modeling.
They did the modeling and
yeah.
the scripting and everything.
Yeah, they were. It's Yusef and Jerry. They're from one's from Waterloo, one's from Conestoga. This was their project for the semester, and they had some experience with other university projects that they had done, and they did this like really fast. I would like commend them for sure. Like they had a working campsite prototype like probably 2 months in, and then it was just a case of like tweaking and iterating. It's really cool. Big props to them. I wish they were here.
Can you delete stuff by joining the fireplace?
Oh, I wish. That'd be awesome. Although I don't know if I'd want to have Canadian Tire like set their products on fire, so probably not.
VR is a very like non-linear experience. I think a lot of us are used to designing things for like mobile or web, where when you storyboard, it's really like this page to this page, and even still like it can get a little bit complicated when you want to storyboard that transitional animation. How did you approach storyboarding for virtual reality?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that's something that I would take into my next project is a full-on storyboard. I'm thinking about like, you'd probably just go by like reaction, especially the tutorial is kind of a storyboard. You can go from like, so first one is like, get them to pick up the ball and then throw it off the platform. Like that's a little bit more linear. In the campsite, I think it's just a case of kind of a action and then results sort of map. So like you'd start with like, they're in the campsite and then option 1 is pick a tent, option 2 is pick a sleeping bag, and there's a few different options. It would probably get pretty messy, but I think that's how I would do it, and then just sort of iterate as I go, take things out that are unnecessary. That answers your question. Any other questions? All right, I'm happy to answer.
It's okay, I'll just yell. I'm loud. Okay, thank you, Abbie, so much for speaking with us today. And also entertaining, right? I mean, it's super fun to watch a bear run through a campsite. Everybody's just, I mean, what's not to love about that, really? Okay, so we do have a few more events happening this week. Tonight we have, UX Waterloo is running a session on changing the face of ethical design. And then we also have a Lego workshop happening tonight at 7 o'clock up in the Roddenberry room. So that should be super fun. I don't know how many of you like Lego. I know I do, so please join us for that. And then we also have, tomorrow we have a talk about product management and UX. So that's going to be interesting. That's a lunchtime talk. I do need to thank the sponsors. You can see them here. ZeetSpace, TD Canada Trust, Communitech, Google, Arctic Wolf, D2L, Oracle NetSuite, Vehicle, Smile.io, City of Waterloo, Manulife, and Balsamic. So thanks to those folks who make all this possible for us. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, give me like 5 minutes to finish
Yeah, if
setting
you
that
want to
up,
stay and check out
come
the
take a
VR
look.
stuff.
If you don't want to try it, there's also like a computer there so you can see it at least.
Yeah.
I'll have that set up.
So this is the interactive part of the session. If you'd like to stay for that, you can try it out. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Abbie. I saw we're here. We're now in my hand.
Thank you. I hope I didn't go too fast, but I think I'm good. Okay, let's get
Okay.
I'm glad. Set it up.
Yeah.